Offensive tackle one for the 2025 NFL draft class is up in the air. And we have Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas and Will Campbell from LSU as the front runners. We're going to break down their games and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being our everydayers. You know, I got to kick this intro to my guy, Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. Can you talk to him, baby?
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man. And what the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. We greatly appreciate it as we are into the scouting notebook. Yes, yesterday was our first day. Today we are turning a page, and I told DP I wanted to get into the trenches, man. We have a couple offensive tackles up, right? We have Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, versus the Texas offensive tackle, Mr. Kelvin Banks Jr. Going to have a really good conversation about that as we open up this scouting notebook, and we're going to wrap this up with Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins. But DP, before we get into this conversation, man, why don't you hit him with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Will Campbell, Keith, listed at 6'6", 325 pounds from your neck of the woods.
That's a big dingo tiger right there, man. That is a big tiger.
A big tiger, Keith. And when you got into, looking from a statistical standpoint in 2023 with Jayden Higgins as his quarterback and that high-powered offense, 0 sacks allowed, only 5 QB hits, and only 29 pressures throughout the entire season, Keith. When you dove into the tape to do his scouting report and to really see who Will Campbell is, what did you come up with?
Power. This is a naturally strong guy. A guy, and I put in my scouting report, he's strong throughout, man. Guy who's strong throughout his core. We use heavy hands when we're talking about interior defensive linemen, right? But this is you get the feel this is a heavy-handed guy, man. We talk about speed to power rushers, right? When he gets hands on them, he can quickly just smother out that rush, right? Because his grip strength and his hands are just so strong. So he stalemates those guys. And then he has the ability to anchor. You talked about 6'6", 320. He's one of those, and you talk about, I'm trying to think of a proper way to describe this, right? One of those cornbread. You almost get the Wisconsin vibe from him, right? Just real big boy. That can also move, man. And then you talk about the run game portion of it. This is a road grader. This is a mauler. He wants to finish people. He's a guy that's gonna work through the whistle. First level, second level guy. That really gets after. He's a high motor play. That's also a term that we usually use for other positions, right? Talking about high motor, but I think he's a high motor offensive lineman, especially in the run game. So I really appreciate what Big Will Campbell can offer. Now, you know me. I love context. I love conversations, right? Watching Will Campbell, though, there are some improvements in his game that, need to be discussed or talked about or addressed, right? And maybe he could use the offseason to address it. I think at times he's over-aggressive, right? And it shows in both the run game and it shows in pass pro, meaning that in run game, he's a guy that he's over-eager at times to make contact, and sometimes that results in him losing balance, right? And it's the same thing with him as a in pass pro, right? He's eager to get those hands on, and sometimes it ends up in him lunging at defenders, right? But he also shows his hands early, so that allows defenders to beat him from time to time. If you go watch the Jared verse, the reps against Florida State and stuff like that, you can kind of see a couple of those things happen. So let's put this in context. I don't want to just give out, right, like just an evaluation. I want to have the conversation on this podcast. When I watched him, a couple guys came to mind in the past, right? Because we talked about the need to potentially kick Peter Skoronski down from offensive tackle to guard. Then we talked about this past year, Graham Barton moving from tackle to guard. Then another name to invoke, Kenyon Green, a guy who played offensive tackle in the SEC, was 330 pounds, right? And that for the Houston went top 15 still. And then for the Houston Texans is going to play guard and be a starting guard in the NFL. So I'm not declaring him and he has to play guard, right? But I think it will, we're going to like say it here, right? But I think it's going to be said other places too. Hey, can this guy move down the guard? Because I get the potentially you talking about Zach Martin-esque level of play, right? Zach Martin, big Quentin Nelson. He can do those type of things at guard, I believe, also because he plays with enough pad leverage and height. And usually, sometimes I feel like when we say offensive tackles, why they can't play guard, we always talk about the leverage, right? And too tall. But I think part of it too is that some offensive tackles don't really like blocking that much, right? Like those are not your people movers. They're kind of they sail off the backside type situations and things like that. But I think he has the temperament to play guard. Like I think he wants to get nasty. He wants to play in the phone booth. He'd rather run through you to get where he needs to be.
No, I agree with that wholeheartedly, Keith. Especially like you said, the power, the physicality. I loved watching him anchor because you see some guys they give up a surge because their chest is exposed, different things like that. You see, it takes them a little bit to get their feet clinched into the dirt, get themselves and drop their hips and their knees and anchor down. I didn't see that from Will Campbell. I saw a guy that could anchor pretty quickly against powerful rushers. And then I also felt like, you tell me if you disagree, I felt like he was a sufficient, more than a sufficient athlete at tackle as well to be able to get to his landing spots. But I do agree that aggressiveness, and I think, what's the phrase, is easier to have a dog and tell him to, to pull him back than to tell him to sick him.
Well,
go get him.
you rather have to tell your dog whoa than sick him. That's the phrase. You rather tell him whoa than sick him.
So it's like I think that fits him. And I mean, by the way you talked, it's not like a Trevor Penning thing where it's like I'm just a bull in the china shop. You know what I mean?
No. I want to eliminate that. No. And if I gave off that vibe with that feeling, I want to eliminate that. No, that was not where I was going with this. We're talking about potentially.
I just remember that was part of the conversation about Trevor Penning we had. I was like, man, like that's a good quality to have, but it's like, you are way too aggressive.
Yeah.
And that's all you bring to the table. There's no technical refinement, different things like that. How did you feel about, like, because of course we don't have like the actual arm length and stuff like that right now. How did you feel like his arm length, just kind of like eyeball, right? Eye testing it. Did you feel like it was NFL caliber to stay at tackle?
I thought it was adequate. I thought it was okay. Because there were times, like you said, you see him shoot him and he smothers the rush right immediately. But then I think it was more of punch timing than it was necessarily it being an arm length, him consistently losing that battle. Because whatever it wasn't consistently, right, that people were getting hands on him before he was getting hands on them. It was more so a punch timing type situation, exposing your hands, giving the defender something to know what to beat and things like that. I think it was, just overextending himself and losing balance, because we also know too that some of the best part of some of the good offensive tackles, and Olu did this really well, right, was that he was able to recover. So even when he loses, he was able to recover because he was in good position. Will, from time to time, because he's so overextended, if he's beat, there's not a good opportunity for him to be able to recover and still kind of sail off the top of that rush arc. So I think it's going to be a good conversation, interesting conversation, right? Watching Will Campbell finally getting into
get him to Dallas, Keith. Give him the Duke Manyweather. You know what I
mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I want to ask you real quick before you transition. How early, just off a summer eval, how early do you think he could go in round one?
Yeah, I think that. I think there's going to be initial conversation about, oh man, he has a couple flaws in his game, right? But then we always talk about the upside that we see in players, and we still see Jordan Morgan, what we talked about with him, right, going the first round. We see J.C. Latham, when people talked about, his pass pro and what he's missing and all this other stuff, him still go at a top 10 pick. So I at this point, right, early on in the scouting process, I feel good with still saying that he's a top 20-ish pick. And that I embrace the conversation for him playing either or tackle or guard, because we know how valuable the offensive line position is. But DP, I'm just getting started, man. I'm just warming up, DP. That was my first couple 3-pointers right there. I promise you, the second half, I got another 30 in me. In this second half, DP, we're talking about Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks, man. Another SEC offensive lineman, because Texas is in the SEC now. So we're going to get into that conversation coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The NBA Finals are set, and we have the Dallas Mavericks versus the Boston Celtics. And guys, that game 1, tips off Thursday night. Think about how excited you'd be if your favorite team was in the NBA Finals and you could get tickets to go to the game. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Now, if you're a fan of either team, yes, this is for you. But if you're just a fan of basketball and you're in the area of any of these teams, Boston or Dallas, you can go right to the Game Time app and get your tickets today. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. listed as 6'4", 324 pounds for the University of Texas, and a guy that statistically in 2023, 1 sack allowed, 1 QB hit, 22 pressures. Just to paint the picture, sounds like this guy knows how to protect the quarterback. And Keith, you did the deep dive into his game. You know, him, again, these aren't official measurements in terms of height and everything else. Him coming in a little bit shorter than a Will Campbell. But looking at his game, what did you take away from it?
Yeah, so I think it's fun, right? Because and we texted about this a little bit yesterday. I was like, okay, I watched Will Campbell first. Now I got to go watch Kelvin Banks to kind of, round some things out, put some things in context, right? We into, new scouting. We took a little break, for 2 months probably. And so you're getting back fresh, and you just have to make sure that you're seeing what you're seeing, right? So I was like, let me watch another offensive tackle prospect to be able to compare some traits and athleticism and things like that. So getting into Kelvin Banks' initial athleticism, the guy is athletic. He has range. I think he has that. Because he's not the size of Olu Fashanu, but I want to put maybe the Ike McQuanu size right out there. I think because he's listed at 6'4". So who knows exactly what the measurements are, and if he grows a half an inch and gets to 6'4.5", potentially 6'5". But one thing I noticed was that this guy has natural range as a player. He's athletic. He's one of those guys, and I like that in the offensive tackle, right? That the fact that whether it's zone blocking, whether it's screens, whether it's just them getting really good depth in their pass sets, he can do that. I think he plays with a good base majority of the time. We talk about the hand situation. I thought he had pretty solid hands. Can't afford to prove them, but those are things that can be improved, right? Like talking about hand usage, and that's what he talked about. All the different offensive line coaches, the Duke Mayweathers. Then we talk about our guy Crafton Lyman right down there in Miami. So you can definitely get developed when it comes to that capacity. But the athletic traits, I think the upside is there. And I think when you compare him to Will, I can see how this battle, it will be picking what you like most, right? Out of a situation, like what do you prefer? I guess that's the best way. Do you want the physical road grader Mauler, or do you want the guy that's athletic, right? Can execute all of the zone blocking stuff, work to the second level effortlessly? It's almost, I don't say pick your poison, because you're picking good things. It's not poison. Pick what you need for your team, and it's probably going to come down to a very a scheme specific and need specific situation if these are the top 2 offensive tackles in the NFL draft.
No, and I think, listening to you talk about how you said, like, it's all about the preference, right? Do I want that physical road grader that's going to be a Will Campbell, or do I want this, this really good athlete at tackle who's better in pass pro, and that's where it goes down to if the Cincinnati Bengals are on the board, and let's say they're moving on from I think it's Orlando Brown. The Cincinnati Bengals are taking Kelvin Banks. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because they need that press because they're going to throw the ball 30 plus times a game, right? Where you look at a team like New England, at least for right now, they're going to take a Will Campbell instead because they're going to want to run the ball, especially early on with a Drake May. So it's going to be, like you said, preference, scheme, style. What's the priority or what's the number one needle mover for our team? Is it our quarterback or is it our run game and how we want to be physical, right? And want to be that team that wants to punch you in the mouth. And then the question is, are you going to get up, right? If we run the ball 20 times in the first half and we see, man, they are not responding well. Let's keep it going in the second, right? We're not going to change until you force us to change. And a Will Campbell will be a better fit there. And I like like you said, when you talk about the range, and I saw that when I was watching, I was like, man, like, all right, like this dude can move. And that was why we really loved Olu, because it was like watching Olu get from the line of scrimmage to the top of his set was with so much quickness and burst and suddenness. Like, you appreciate that when you see tackles that are tall and long-legged and long-limbed that can move in that way. And I felt like, and you correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Kelvin Banks also redirects well. If you throw an inside counter, he can shuffle and move with you laterally and just basically mirror. Like we're in Indianapolis every year for the combine, right? And with that drill where they have the tackles on the field and they're doing the mirror drill, they got to move with the coach. Can you keep your feet and your base, and can you stay square and not surrender leverage moving from one direction to the next? And can you do it quickly with suddenness and stay under control? Kelvin Banks Jr. can do that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'll say, like, just with this class, just having the different, I guess, styles, right? It makes me excited to get into more of the offensive tackles when you talk about, the Emory Jones, right? Which is Will Campbell's teammate. And then you had an offensive tackle, interior offensive lineman from Bama, Tyler Booker. Then I seen you tweeted out about the offensive tackle from Arizona, right? The Jonah Savania. I hope that's his name. And then
I figured out how to pronounce his name yet.
Yep. Then in your region, DP, you have, Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle from Ohio State, Johnny Cornelius, right? So they're going to be some good offensive linemen. And then that's not even talking about the small school guys that pop up right later on in the process. Year. So, yeah, I think this offensive tackle class is going to be yet again what the offensive line class in total is going to be a good offensive line class just from early glimpses, because both of these guys, like I said, they provide different things. And when I say this and I talk about their strengths, I'm not just saying like that's the only thing to do. I still think they're well-rounded prospects. I think there are details that they both can work on, but they both starters in the NFL. They're going to give you high-level reps in pass pro, give you high-level reps in run game. They both just have kind of different strengths in how they approach the game and attack the game. With DP, let's keep this thing going and flowing, man. We are on to Iowa State's Big 12 country. We know this is the first year of the Power 4. I think they're in the Big 12 still, right? So we're going to go to Big 12 country, man, and talk about a prospect I haven't heard of yet, DP, so I'm excited to hear about him. Iowa State wide receiver Jayden Higgins.
This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. Guys, it's an exciting time here on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I'm happy. Keith is happy, my co-host, that we are turning the page, or we're opening the book to the scouting notebook in summer scouting for the 2025 NFL draft class. We're excited to bring these summer profile and evals to you so that you can be excited when the college football season kicks off for 2024, or when you're playing EA College Football 25. Guys, I'm telling you right now, therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you think about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Keith, wide receiver out of Iowa State, Jayden Higgins, listed at 6'4", 210 pounds, coming off a season in the Big 12, 53 receptions, 983 yards receiving, and 6 total receiving touchdowns. I believe he averaged 18 and a half yards per catch. And I'm gonna start off with the comps that I kind of have for my pro comps. The first name that came to mind when I watched him, I thought about Michael Thomas in terms of how he won, especially Michael Thomas coming out of Ohio State. You know, that nickname Slant Boy that Michael Thomas absolutely did not like, but he was one of the best slant runners in the league. You know what I mean? And I see that exact same thing correlating with Jayden Higgins. You know, the slants, the in breakers, the outbreakers, knowing how to use his body, the short area quickness and footwork to win it in the line of scrimmage and move a guy off his spot and man-to-man just to be able to get to his spot in the middle of the field. He also plays not just the X, he plays the Z, he plays the slot, he plays, you know, the reduced receiver spot, the 3 in the 3-by-1 set. He's close to the line of scrimmage. He lines up all over the place. And what I love about him as well, he's a guy that works the middle of the field. He doesn't matter. He's a collision receiver where, again, 6'4", 210. And I remember correctly, Michael Thomas is 6'3", 215. So like the body types are similar, but also like, you know, just kind of looking at his game, the things I really appreciate, again, big body, the catch radius is there. He can make plays at the catch point, extend the catch point as well. Short to intermediate, consistent winner, whether it's slants, crossers, 10 to 12 yard digs, post routes in the high red zone, whatever it is, he can run those routes. He can win from a multitude of places with his positional and alignment versatility. Red zone threat. You get a guy at 6'4", 210, you already know that fade route is coming some point in time if we get into the high red, especially the slot fade. And I think one of the games was the snow game against Kansas State. And this is when I was like, man, this dude is just a little different. And I love kind of finding him as a gem, the body positioning and stem. Like he ran a slot fade and you got off coverage, guys taking away inside leverage, and he keeps him straight on the line, jab steps him at the top and gets back outside. Dude nearly slips and falls, and it's an easy pitch and catch for a touchdown. He knows how to, and what I really appreciate from him for a big receiver, he is a good route runner to me, because you don't know what is actually coming, right? Like it's not a situation where you can tell and predict the breaking point for him. You can't he's a little bit more fluid for a bigger receiver than I expected when I really got into his tape. And then he has that yak ability too, because even in that game, he caught, I think it was a shallow cross or an outbreaker, and he turns it upfield. He makes 2 or 3 guys miss, juke, spins in the snow, mind you. You know what I mean? It's snow. It's like literally 2 or 3 inches of snow on the ground, and he's still stopping, looking like Reggie Bush at USC, stopping on the dime on the sideline. And I'm like, this is a big receiver doing this, man. This is a little different, and I got to give him credit. He's a sure-handed receiver. Only 5 drops on 221 targets in his college career, because he started his career out at, I believe it was Eastern Kentucky, before transferring last year to Iowa State. Now, to kind of get into the things that I think the questions that I'm going to have, and I think people are going to have, is the long speed, similar to Michael Thomas, right? How can you win consistently? Can you win vertically on a consistent basis with foot speed and with being able to win those foot races, right? I think that's going to be a question mark for him. Some people are going to view him, and I wouldn't be surprised. I can already see the tweets. I can already hear it come draft season. Oh, he's a big power slot. He can win out there. I think he can also win inside, but I think that's going to be a knock on him as well.
I want to ask you, do you have any more recent comps for him? Like, just like, I guess guys, if I throw out the name of like Drake London, is that somewhat comparable to what he provides as a player?
A little bit. I'll even go a step further. In this class, the wide receiver 1 and 2, which we're going to get into throughout this summer, Luther Burden and Tatora McMillan from Arizona. He's probably I don't want to say poor man's, but he's the discount version of Tatora McMillan, in my opinion, where they do almost the exact same thing. I think Tatora might be a little more explosive, just a little bit, but like everything that I love about Tatora, watching him on film, catch radius, route running, foot quickness, body positioning, strength, all that stuff. Yeah, my boy Jayden Higgins got the same thing. He just plays for Iowa State, and nobody knows him, man.
All right,
So it's
so
like it
next,
is what it is.
I got another question. Then, with that being said, we threw out some lofty names. We threw out Michael Thomas, who went second round, probably should have been a first round pick. We threw out Drake London, right, who was a top 10 pick.
Overall.
Yeah. And so I want to ask, are you ready to say that this is a top 50 to 75 prospect? And maybe I don't want to say ready. Let me not say that because we haven't gotten to everybody and we know that classes vary. But based off of the work you've done in the past and the classes in the past, is this guy a top 75 prospect based on what's happened in previous years?
I think so. I think that combination.
That's big, man. I mean, because
Yeah.
we're talking about a wide receiver that nobody's discussing, right? That nobody knows his name. So to have a top 75 prospect sitting out there in Iowa State, definitely
crazy because you know what I mean. Like it's just the simple fact that, like you said, nobody's watching Iowa State like that. No one's thinking that there's any players there. Because I also thought about our boy Xavier Hutchinson. You know what I mean? But I think
my guy. Can we give Xavier Hutchinson a shout out? Shout out to Xavier.
Gotta give Xavier Hutchinson a shout
get my guy on the field, man. He's a bona fide playmaker, man. Get him on
either
the
that
field.
Or trade him.
Yeah, or trade my guy and get him on the field somewhere else, man. Get my guy on the field, man.
He's a good player, man.
What did I do, DP? I gave him a second round grade. He didn't go to the 7th. Get my guy on the field, man. I'm still all in on it.
Preseason, baby, we looking. That's how you make your money. Go out there and dominate in preseason. Somebody else calling the text like, let me get Xavier Hutchins off your hands. You know what I mean? But that's another. And you know, some people are like, well, that's low hanging fruit because they went to the same school. But the same thing, some of the same things we saw from Xavier Hutchinson in terms of like where he can win, being a big slot, being a guy that can like literally box out defenders and different things like that, work in the middle of the field with like no fear. Yeah, you see those exact same things with Jayden Higgins. And yeah, I think he is a top, I would say he's a top 75 pick for me right now. In terms of Summer Sky, we still got a lot of stuff to flush out and really like, see who all is in this class and everything like that. But he is a good wide receiver and a guy that no one really knows about, but I'm happy to be the first one to kind of get out there and like, hey man, turn on the tape and check this guy out because he can play.
Okay, well, I'm with it, DP. I'm excited to watch him, honestly. You talk about that size profile. I think at this point, right, he has an opportunity to only elevate. Because we know the top of this wide receiver class, but we know what makes the wide receiver classes is that middle ground. And I think at this point last year, nobody had a AD Mitchell slated, right? Nobody had what I'm thinking about his teammate. Xavier Worthy, right, as maybe a potential first rounder, but there was still a lot of conversation. Keon Coleman, we still had to figure out where he was going to fall, right?
Xavier Legette.
Xavier Legette. Nobody. I just remember the first podcast. I think it was the second week of the season. He was like, "Hey, they got this South Carolina wide receiver that's pretty good," and then I watched him, and I'm like, "DP, now he's really good." I was like, "Oh Lord, this dude's a dude." So we know how this thing goes, man. But that's why you tap into here, man, to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, because this is what we do, man. We talk draft conversations, we talk draft strategies, we talk draft philosophies. We do it all over here at the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with DP. That wraps up another episode, man, of Locked On NFL Draft. I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there is my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson, and you can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being our everydayers. Guys, we're going to take a quick little break from the Scouting Notebook. We're going to get back into some OTA stuff on tomorrow's show, and we'll be back on Friday with the Scouting Notebook. So come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.